And yay. And now I'm gonna do even better. And I'm gonna share my screen so that I can share our slideshow, and then we will get started, Nathan. So can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So this evening we wanted to feature Nathan Fan. He's been a part of our community for a couple of years now. I've had the joy of being part of an artist group with him in the past few months, right? Since February. Gosh, I can't believe it's already been 3 months. Welcome, Nathan.
Oh, yeah.
He was part of our group show last year, where we did a theme on patience. And I would love for you, Nathan, to just share with us a little bit about yourself and how you first started making work. If you don't mind, I'll just be kind of scrolling through your images, kind of back and forth, if that works
sure.
for you.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So as you talk, we can kind of peruse your work.
So as Angela said, my name is Nathan Fan. I've been in Dallas since 2017. I remember very distinctly because the very next day after my first night in Dallas, the Women's March was happening, and it was right outside the window where I was staying. So, it's always nice to be able to tie, a certain historical event to my time in Dallas. And, I'll just say this, kind of like my joy in both God, as well as with beauty and wonder and all of those wonderful things that you read in your meditation earlier, Angela. A lot of it began to happen particularly through story. So the first medium that I was actually most gravitated towards was the medium of film. And I remember it was when watching the Lord of the Rings series in theaters when they came out. I think I watched the Fellowship, I think, at home, but then the first one I saw in theaters was The Two Towers. And I just distinctly remember, of course, just like the final scene of the second film where the Ents are taking over Isengard, and just being kind of blown away by the imagery and being swallowed up into the story, much as like the flood waters of the River Isen were swallowing up the Dark Tower of Orthanc and wiping over. But as it was awesome to also realize that Tolkien had a kind of like a great moment in creating that after hearing Shakespeare's Macbeth and reading about the Dunsinane Hill attacking, Birnam Wood attacking Dunsinane Hill. So through film, I kind of began to develop just this love for the visuals as well as for narrative, and kind of, throughout my life, I sort of saw it as a dichotomy, much as like how I saw through much of my life, a dichotomy between creativity and religion. I think the dichotomy between story and visual was always that, like, stories are always dynamic, visuals are always static. And I liked the dynamic aspect. So that's why I was drawn to film, moving picture, and writing, like getting characters and letting them go. And I think the bifurcation that I saw between religion and creativity, which generated much tension in my younger years, was, religion was always about rules and morals and ethics, and creativity and beauty always kind of felt, exciting and wonderful. And I don't want to, paint that I had a myopic sense of what religion was. I understood that, it was restriction always for the sake of, experiencing the grandeur of God, but it always felt like I had to make a choice in my life. And so oftentimes I'm kind of caught in these tensions, and throughout much of my youth, I kind of had to make decisions. So when I went to college, I had to make a decision about emphasizing the dynamic of story over visual art. And so I kind of got involved with studying film at Biola University. And that's also where I began to start reading and studying a lot of these classic works of literature that I've come to love. And I think, I don't know if it's accurate, so this might be anachronistic, but there was a film that I watched. It was called The Passion of Joan of Arc. And I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but it's a 1928 film by Carl T.H. Dreyer, who was both a very theological mind as well as an incredible filmmaker. And his film, The Passion of Joan of Arc, which is a silent film, I watched it and that was the first time where I really began to see, like, oh my goodness, visuals and narrative are not competing. And for what it's worth, I also experienced that great healing of the divide I'd also experienced of like creativity and religion or spirituality are not divided either. But I can definitely name the film that helped me build that bridge between religion and creativity, and that was the film Tree of Life. So if you've ever seen that film, it really is just a soaring expression of the union of those two things, of nature, of grace, of story and visuals, of religion and creativity. So after watching those two films, I kind of I never really realized this, but I think that's kind of where I got into this big kick on black and white, because it was films like I'm blanking on it, The Passion of Joan of Arc. There's this German film by Fritz Lang called M, which if you're a film buff, I see a nod.
Yeah.
But there's Peter Lorre, who also is famous in the film Casablanca. He has these like this incredible expression. And the films of Akira Kurosawa, which most of them were also filmed in black and white, certain films of Alfred Hitchcock. And not to say I ever did this consciously. I'm sort of rewriting my own narrative. But when I look back, when I hear your question, Angela, and look back at the stories of why I got into art, it really was because of filmmakers that worked in the black and white medium. And so I think it's no surprise that a lot of my vision also turns out black and white. But I want to come back to that film, The Passion of Joan of Arc, because I think it was with that particular film where everything started coming together for me. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced something so triumphant, it feels like a defeat. And what I mean by that is, like, when I watched that film, I remember feeling that depression that some of us artists might feel of like, man, why bother making anything else, right? Like, this film has done it all. And yet at the same time, I was met with the exact same strength of feeling to be like, this film has done so much, it makes me want to do something. And as I began to really examine the role that particularly that film has played in my own personal story, as well as the story of my art, it really has become the image to which I gravitate towards with the images that I choose to make. So a lot of these images that you might recognize, there's a heavy religious imagery, a lot of them based on Byzantine iconography, a lot of them based on classics of Western art. And if I get really bold, I might even try a original composition as it is too. But when I heard the story of Joan of Arc portrayed in not like a bland psychological, she's a historical figure and let's discredit all of her personal accounts of spiritual experiences. Let's try to read into her like, psychoanalyst with a gap of about 800 years. And this film didn't do that, right? This film actually was like, all right, what if we took seriously everything that she claimed as reality and used the medium of film to try our best to enter into that reality? And, to just for a lack of a better word, it really just opened my eyes to how it was all connected. So that's kind of how I got particularly invested in the types of image that I make that are heavily religious, and yet also kind of like in line with that dichotomy that I mentioned earlier, like religious and yet also creative and expressive. And I don't know if anyone here is fans of the novel My Name is Asher Lev. But I remember I read that my freshman year of college when I was an art minor. And I remember, I forget it now, but like he has this mentor. Asher Lev has this mentor, and he says something like, "Narrative art isn't real art," and I was just like, "Oh yeah, he's right. Narrative art isn't real art, right? It's just illustration." And it took me a while for me to actually come to own, or let me just say this: it took me a while to deconstruct that prejudice and actually realize that the kind of art I want to make is the art that also holds together that story. So much like the love for film that I've had, I always try to use these portraits to try to capture, I don't know, try to capture the significance of the moments of these persons' lives. And I guess, yeah, that's
Take us into
that's the big deal.
Yes, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. A lot of that I hadn't even heard. So that's really cool that you shared so much detail. Take us a little bit into your process. Like, do you have an organizational method, or how do you come up with your next idea, which narratives you're wanting to tell?
Yes. So I'll say, starting with the image that I have in front of me, which is the Annunciation. Art history devotees might recognize this composition. So a lot of my love for art just also began with a love of history. I can't explain it to you, Angela, or anyone else, but for some reason, there's a part of my brain that just likes knowing stuff and being able to know when and where to put it in history. And so for that reason, I've loved film history all my life. I loved, political history, theological history, ecclesial history, and then of course, art history. And so kind of in stages when I was in college, I met, I had a professor that would rank all of the art pieces in the class from best to worst. And I never had an art piece that crossed halfway. It was never in the better half. I was always in the bottom half of the class. And so I kind of hid behind my shame, kind of like not feeling skilled enough, and kind of leaned heavily onto the historical part, which came more naturally to me. So, in my, find myself sort of college days, I sort of, kept my drawings very private for a while and just kind of made a name for myself as more of an art history sort of person. And lo and behold, several years later, I think I was really grateful to come to realize that, like, once my skill finally caught up to a place where I was no longer ashamed to share my work, I found that the kind of art that I really wanted to make was informed by that dedication to art history. So yes, the piece that you were just at, yes, that one is it's a inspiration from a Van Gogh piece, who I really like just because of the textures of his work. But Van Gogh was drawing from Rembrandt. So for me, as an art historian, well, let me not claim that lofty title. As a fan of art history, as well as an artist myself, I wanted to both capture the two things I loved about Rembrandt and the things I loved about Van Gogh. Rembrandt, of course, is his lighting. So some of the pieces you've seen have really stark contrast between light and dark, but this one I really wanted to get that ethereal glow that Rembrandt is able to achieve in his paintings, while also keeping that rich texture that Van Gogh is able to achieve in his paintings. So for me, like, this particular piece was just sort of like, oh, this would be really fun to try to wed together my love of Rembrandt's light and my love of Van Gogh's texture, as well as reading myself into this theological story, right? I just finished listening to the audiobook of Tale of Two Cities, and the main character keeps quoting John 11, which this is a story, this is a drawing of, where Lazarus is recalled to life, right? And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And I think this came in a moment in my life where I was feeling recalled to life, right? Where I was really able to hear the words that Jesus has spoken and really believe. And I wanted to capture that moment of emergence. Now, of course, if I bring this before my seminary friends, many people can offer great criticism because, this shows a Western European, style tomb, not really the cave that Lazarus crawled out of. The clothing is not the strips of mummy-like clothing that he was robbed in, or sorry, that he was buried in. And you might even notice that the features of Lazarus also resemble a Asian male, and I guess the Middle East is Asian, but an East Asian male. No. So obviously there are many artistic liberties taken with this piece, but I think it was a great homage to both the spiritual epiphany that I encountered, as well as what I loved in art history. So yeah, I think a lot of these pieces that you'll see, I know the next one, of course, is based off a Fra Angelico composition. The one after that is based off of a drawing of Guido Reni. Now, one thing I will just say about the medium is I work primarily with almost entirely ink and paper. So the great challenge for me, the mind game that I play and whenever I look at these pieces is it's a totally different medium, right? How do I channel what Guido Reni is able to accomplish with oil and brushstrokes through a medium that's far less forgiving, right? Ink, like as soon as you ink it, it's there. And every piece has the same narrative with increasing anxiety and pressure as more and more ink shows up on the page. Because, at any point, right, a violent sneeze or a startled jump can you fear it can ruin it, but I also tell the truth. Many times the mistakes end up becoming you end up working around the mistakes and they end up becoming some of the best parts of the piece. This next piece was just a kind of an interpretation on my own. A very good friend of mine was kind of helping me out with this piece. I was like, it's a commission. They wanted the Bible verse, Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. There will be streams in the desert, water bursting forth. And I was just like, I don't really do landscape. And my friend, who was a landscape painter, kind of was giving me some pointers about, well, have you considered what it might look like to turn the water into a figure? And so I was kind of thinking like, okay, what would it look like? So again, there's so much of art, which is just games and fun for me, where it's just like, all right, how am I able to pull this off? How can I make water look almost like it was a figure in the piece, rather than just, an inanimate object, water. This next piece is based off a piece that we have here in Texas. It's Michelangelo's earliest known painting, which of course is also based off of another artist's work, which was originally done in graphite. And Michelangelo accomplished this painting when he was 13 years old. And there's a part of me that laughs because as a teacher, I teach 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And some of their doodles actually kind of look like the demons in this painting that are attacking St. Anthony in the desert. But I'll just say this, a brief story behind this piece. It was a commission from a student's family. And I know that student who, I offered them readings about many historical figures, including St. Anthony. And she was drawn to the figure of St. Anthony, and herself was very open about her own mental health struggles. So in drawing this piece, the game part of it was I wanted each of these demons to represent one of the 7 deadly sins, and try to make it like subtle, but also detectable. But then the heart behind the piece was also just realizing the role that an image has in someone's life, right? Like images can be the things that we see every single day. Some days we pay attention to, some days we pay no attention to. And I just wanted this to be an image for that student, for their family, of like, whenever we feel overwhelmed by mental health struggles, or to put it more bluntly, whenever we feel, well, put it differently, whenever we feel attacked by demons in any shape or form, I wanted this image to be an image of hope, right? Hope in the in God's great deliverance right? The demons never overcame Antony. He overcame them by God's grace. But also just a, like I said, a visual game, right? It's like for somebody to get maybe out of their head a little bit and just look at the intricacy of certain details and just get them to pay attention to something else. So this is a really fun piece for me. I hope I was talking about it and that you were able to play a little, see if you could detect the the 7 deadly sins.
Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, but to talk about your work, Nathan. So I want to open it up to anyone a couple of questions, if anyone has a question for you.
Oh, yes.
I do. I have a question. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello there.
Hi.
Thanks so much for sharing, and I really relate to a lot of what you say about narratives and visuals and narrative and loving film and literature and all of that. So thank you for sharing your story. I guess my question is twofold. I'm curious, I don't know if you were like a film major through college, but what was that? How did you transition into like from film to being a visual artist now? And also, as I'm looking at your work and as I'm even how you talk, I really appreciate you're very clear as you share your influences, almost like a lecture, like a lecture I like listening to. Like, have you ever thought, and seeing your work is ink, makes me think graphic novel or narrative, that is narrative. Have you ever thought of like expanding your visual artwork into like moving it to like performance or like graphic novels or installation, like kind of opening it up where that narrative and enveloping experience would become a part of like these images becoming a part of that? So those are my two questions.
Oh, yes. I'll speak to the most recent question. I think I've been very excited to try to want to think about many new ways to experience this, because I guess fundamental to my art philosophy, I guess, is that all mediums, right, whether it's a story or a visual or a piece of music or a performance, all of it is trying to grasp at this this invisible truth. And I think what I love about what we get to do as visual artists is, of course, we're taking the invisible truth, the invisible feelings, and trying to make it visible. But I think for myself, I'm always interested to try to present the aspect of the invisible truth in as many ways as can be presented. I think I've really thought a lot about writing sort of a book to kind of have images alongside biographical stories of many of these figures.
That's
as well as
thinking. Yeah, even something like that, I can see it happening so easily.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, that's really encouraging. And yeah, I guess the first question of transition, as I could just be very optimistic, which I know I am, but I've found that almost anything that I take in can be useful one day. And so I while I don't doubt that every now and then an idea for a screenplay or a film will cross my mind. And, I think even though right now my heart is fully invested in what I'm doing with the visual arts, is I also keep that opportunity of excitement just in the back of my head, if anything, just as something exciting to think about. But the transition that I made from film to visual arts kind of happened almost alongside like a career decision that I made to start studying theology to prepare to become a teacher, which I now am. And, with the work of writing theological papers and, reading, esoteric texts, my creative license could no longer be done in writing stories as I had enjoyed doing at one point. Instead, I just started drawing stories instead. And that kind of became just as a safe outlet, which is ended up becoming something that I now favor in, like I would definitely think of myself as a visual artist before, a filmmaker or a storyteller.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. We are going to move on into our critique, but thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. It's really impactful to hear all the backside of your work and just the nature of how contemplative and how much thought you put into it. So thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Yes, I'm very excited to, I always just love celebrating art with people. So I'm just glad to be here.
So we will take about 15 to 18 minutes each this evening, and I will keep track of time. So don't you worry. I will let you know if we need to move on, just so that we have enough time for every single person. So let that fall on me. And y'all just feel free to give feedback popcorn style. I won't call on you unless you're completely mute. Then I might say, hey, Dawn, what do you think? I'm just picking on her because I know she likes to be quiet. But feel free to speak whenever you'd like. Okay, George, if you'd like to introduce your work, I'll just kind of scroll through. And if there's anything specific that you're looking for, please let us know so that we can give some thought to those questions.
Well, greetings, friends. My name is George. I have been an art house friend for a couple of years and have been painting for about 20 years. And most of my work is what I would determine as sort of expressionistic abstract. But the story behind my pieces are often very personal. The one that is up right now is called Redacted and Redeemed. And it borrows, if you're a fan of Austin Kleon and his is an artwork, he got famous by taking New York Times articles and kind of redacting to create poetry out of blacking out a piece of a text in a New York Times article. And this was a piece, these are colors that you're seeing in there that I almost never paint with. The color pink, a bright yellow, a really vibrant red are not palettes that I'm drawn to. And for some reason, I start out with a pretty wild abstract and there's some markings and different things. And then a bit of my own personal story and kind of my own personal work that I've been working through in the last couple of years of just working with a counselor to kind of explore some of the challenging scars of life and thinking through them and naming them and thinking of the emotions of them. And when I put on these redaction marks, the black paint that drips down, I was sort of silencing the pain of some of those hurts. So what I'm now at a place is I'm kind of growing through my own exploration and learning to be empathetic in the situations to people that I have perceived have harmed me, is to think more of the redemption and empathy and curiosity I have for those people, to not make it something that I black out, but actually something that I can not forget, but I can forgive. So I am working in a detailed way with a counselor on forgiveness and have been working through a number of situations, and I'm moving down that path. So I've kind of got this piece of work this far. There was an idea in my head of redemption that I don't necessarily want to black out these hard places, actually experience grace, empathy, kindness, love for people in my life. But that's redacted. Redeemed is the second word to the title of that piece, and that came later.
Okay.
This is some details of a commission I'm finishing
larger?
up right now.
Okay. Is this the larger piece?
That's the larger version. It's for a private school in Arlington that's experiencing their 30th anniversary this year.
Hmm.
I wanted to celebrate the highs and lows, the seasons of a academic private school that goes through challenges and funding and what have you, and times that the doors almost closed and yet they persevered. And so what I've just received, I think I shared with Nathan or maybe Dawn, I was waiting for some photos of a student body, about 600 students and faculty members that I'm now laying in on top of this kind of abstraction and maybe representational of mountainscape that will represent sort of the legacy of years and years of student body and faculty members of this community, with an idea of just written in, I don't know if you can show a detail, Angela.
Is there another detail? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even read it, but written throughout this is the words from Psalm 139, which is the scripture this campus has really pushed and loved for many years. And so you've searched me, Lord, and know me. You know when I sit, when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. And even though in the final piece, the words are almost abstracted by the layers, I have written the verses 139 times on the canvases just to represent kind of the repetition over the years and years of this missional community trying to teach kids to love God and to know him and recognize that they're known by a God and a Savior.
Hmm.
Gosh, that's awesome. Can we go? I'm gonna go back to the first one.
Redacted.
I feel like this is so powerful, George. I think hearing you talk about it and how personal it is, but also just how it seems really just bold. It's like a bold style. When you were talking about, kind of giving that redeemed, I was thinking, what if one of these black marks was like had some white over it, just like one, not a ton, but it might, communicate that turn, change of heart. But that's really the only suggestion that I had for it. I really love the red and I love all the pinks in there. I think that you're kind of, messing with that back and forth, like what's behind there, kind of trying to peer behind all those black marks. That's at least my experience.
I'm really curious, George, especially with, abstract expressionist, but what's the scale that we will be looking at this in, like in person?
This is a 48 inch by 48 inch canvas.
Okay.
4 feet by 4 feet.
Oh, right. 4 feet. Sorry.
I like it large, Nathan.
Yeah. Well, I love the, there's, one other thing I wanted to ask about, in the picture of the whole, not the detailed one, but there's this strong black line with an angle moving upwards that's kind of parallel about 1/3 up. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Right here. Can y'all see my arrow?
Yeah.
This one.
And I'm curious about that because part of me, in like with the photograph, it makes it almost like it's a shadow, like there might be some 3D element to the piece. But could you tell me what that line is?
So I think there was even a sense of, even the movement of paint kind of moves from lower left to upward right. There was a sense of hopefulness, even as I was addressing challenging times.
Mhm.
So that was kind of just a mark to kind of say, graph line, a financial chart, something that there's a hockey stick in life, that things, I mature to a place where I see God's goodness in multiple ways. And so the idea also was, even though I was addressing dark things, I did perceive and recognize this light and color, and kind of taken in a whole, the tapestry of life is wondrous, delightful. So I wanted to kind of knock a few things back, but the all in is a heart of contentment and gratefulness.
Mhm.
Well, I'll say this: there's a certain duality to this piece that seems really profound. I think the theme that you talked about with redacted, right? Of course, and in relation to your other artwork with like the writing of the verse 139 times, is that whether or not you wrote something under those black squares, the title invites us to understand that, right? And and of course, that great aura of mystery where the black squares are covering the very vibrant and dynamic, colorful, I don't know, it's a very pulsating, I guess, but like the black squares end up covering up the beauty of the color, but also thematically, they're being seen as covering up words to a story, right? Words of a message of some kind. And there's I don't know, I guess it creates a very interesting tension in light of that, of like you're actually asking the viewer in two different ways to look under the squares, right? Kind of look under the squares to see the color, and to look under the squares to see the words that have been redacted. And with that, I feel like it creates another duality of the images of the squares that you use so evenly spaced that it also looks like a brick wall kind of being superimposed over something. Which again, knowing the story of the piece is incredibly beautiful, because what you've described as your artistic intent from your heart is actually the complete opposite of a wall, right? Like you're talking about going to counseling and kind of having breakthroughs, right? You're talking about letting down your guard. You're talking about showing people who you are in your art, and that's again a very profound juxtaposition that we see between like this wall-like imagery, especially with a flat panel as well that would be hanging on a wall, I imagine. But then also it goes all the more to highlight the crevices and the spaces between the words as openings of getting through, right? Almost to the point where like the longer I spend time with this piece, which I know is obfuscated through the digital way, and rather than like the actual paint on what looks to be wood board or canvas, but there's this a battle between the color and the black, where it's like who is on the foreground and who is on the background, right? And yet, even as I describe that battle, there's still this harmony.
Mel, what did you want to say? You had your hand raised.
Love it.
Well, I want to say first, I wanted to thank George for sharing these two pieces. And this particular one, I was struck as I was listening to George speak about it, and then also to Nathan's response. What prompted me, George, what came up inside of me is your initial inspiration from the work of the artist who was redacting New York Times articles, yes, and creating poetry.
Mm-hmm.
That artist was working with words and printed words and creating new compositions from printed words. And yet this work of yours seems to be a little bit more about memory and emotion and forgiveness and a struggle with how to forgive when there's so much hurt. And when I look at the full piece, and that, you know, we've talked about that ascending curve, right, from the lower left halfway up to the upper right. To me, that actually almost looks like a scab that is protecting what's beneath, and it's protecting the fresh blood. It's protecting the blood and containing that hurt. Just a response. But the reason why I raised my hand, George, was I was wondering if you did a second piece, same size, perhaps even same background, but if you're redacting, how would you show that you are not necessarily redacting memory, because we can't, we know that.
Yeah.
We don't need to. Christ did that for us, for all of us, and for all that we will experience. How would you show that? So that's why I raised my hand.
I love that. I appreciate that, because I actually titled the piece Redacted in a season of darkness. So as I sort of emerge more holistic in my view of things, the challenge to experience that in a different way is really delightful to think about. And I love, Angela, the idea of the uniqueness of just one covered piece in white would be sort of a reflection of God's grace.
Or even, George, even a progression.
Jamie, you're
Because
next.
over time we heal. And
Yes.
each of these marks, and we all have them, but they're healed. And just beautiful. Thank you.
All right, Jamie.
Oh, I raised my hand because when you talked about progression, also first, thank you for sharing this. And the more you're sharing and the more I'm looking at it, it is also helping me. So thank you, and making me think about things in my own life and what is possible. So thank you. But it sounds like if this was made at a point in time, as I think mentioned, if I'm gathering that I'm excited about, I'm interested in seeing not necessarily this one changing unless you're truly convicted to change it, but like pray about it, which we should do. I believe in that, but yeah, maybe it does progress. Maybe there are new ones to show how the wall is breaking. I did see it as a wall. I did read brick wall first, but right as you talked about, even maybe before, I started thinking of the Austin Kleon because I'm familiar with that, and how it almost, it's so beautiful because yeah, maybe those were memories, even if they're not typed physical words, and how those do make brick walls. Like I have had a brick wall, I have had a black membrane around me, you know, that I'm learning to break through, you know, and even as I'm looking at it on the screen, and this was sort of touched on, but I'm seeing like the brick wall is suspended because the real thing is the color behind it. That's the real, it's all a part of life, but the journey that we are going on and that you're going is the bricks will fall away and all those memories, they won't be forgotten, but you are finally seeing it's like Jesus when he resurrected, he could pass through the walls. That's what that's what I'm thinking when I look at this. That's really what I'm saying. Because it's not when we are resurrected and we are made new, and there had to be a death. He is the ultimate death to life, so that we can have our death to life and be with him. And then he passes through walls, and what I'm seeing in this. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Yeah.
1 minute warning.
I think, George, if I could just say, can you hear me, George?
I can.
Okay, thanks for sharing these. These are beautiful. Good job. I think if I could just say, what if you inverted into the colorful being the bricks and the black being in the back? That also could give a sense of the color coming out. So almost a Rothko effect where the bright color is coming towards us and the darker color is receding into the black. And I would just even challenge you to not make it a flat black, but a black that's created by making like two opposites, like phthalo blue and alizarin crimson, where it's a real deep black, so it sucks you in, kind of blue. And I think also, like, if you could even think of the words, because you are a word guy. I know you put words in your work. So this might not be weird for you to actually put words, just a few, not everywhere, but on the bricks, Okay, just like if you were doing Austin Kleon, I'm not saying you need to do it exactly like him, not like that, but like if these were words in your memory to be forgiven, then writing them. And then I also thought about this, and you can throw this away if you want to, but you could do transparent colored washes over the top. And so there's still bricks there. There's still the memory of the pain, yet there's these colorful washes over it. So like through water, through just through the color. Because if I'm honest, George, I think the red, this is my view, and you can take it and leave it. The red looks like a scar, looks like a wound. If perhaps the background was trying to be that joy and brightness and all that, I might even encourage you to take the red out, because red is such a strong fight color. It's such a, we invoke wounds and blood, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is a bad piece. I think it's beautiful. I think you're on your way to like a series. So please keep going.
Love that.
Yeah, I see it as a series. Like each one is its own moment of reckoning. Whatever the future ones will be too. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for your thoughts, guys.
We didn't. If you have thoughts about the other one,
don't worry about it.
Email after. We have to move on. But thank you so much, George. All right, Jamie, you're next.
Oh boy. Okay. Hello. Okay. Hi, I'm Jamie.
Hi.
Okay. So should I just talk about each one as you flip through it?
Sure, you can do that, or you can just speak generally and I can flip through.
Oh, I like that better. Okay, that's cool. Okay, I sent 3 in, and these are 3 pieces that kind of show what a lot of current and future trajectory is looking like. These are all on wood panel with the 1.5 inch thick framing, and any of them that have the paper, like the lined paper, that is like actual collaged paper on there. Oh, and sizes are this one, the gold leaf big one is 24 by 30 inches. The Beulah blue one is I think it's 9 by 12 and the black one is it's square. I think it's 18, it might be 20 by 20, I think. So, and any of the leafing is like gold leaf or silver leaf that I applied. I cannot afford full 100% or high carat, so it's the imitation, but that's part of the story. That's just what I could afford. I'm almost wanting to not say too much about them at first to hear feedback, but I can tell the titles, and I'm willing to if anyone has questions. But this one is I do titles a lot, like 2 juxtaposed titles. So this one is called Sketchbook Page, Day of Small Things. And the other one, that one is called And Your Land Will Be Married. And the other black one that says See Beauty is called it's called Jabbok Dawn Concept Album. Finally, the title came. It was circling for days or weeks. That's where it's landed right now. I guess I can say this too really quick. I'm interested in what the materials reference to you, like what line paper is to you. I know what it is to me. I don't know. I'm kind of interested in hearing what people are read right away, and I don't mind saying more later also.
Absolutely. I'm going to scroll through. Let's be okay with silence as we ponder.
Jamie, for
Yeah,
your piece, And Your Land Will Be Married. So there's obviously so much more going on beneath the surface, right? Than what we see. I mean, that's what I see. I see these plants or these trees and this amazing root structure. Now, is that what you were showing?
Yeah, those are little seeds.
Little seeds.
Yeah.
But it's almost as though this piece of yours has a voice, and it's so noisy beneath the surface, you know, that there is silence and quiet with these beautiful, fragile leaves bursting up into the air, but that the real work is happening beneath the surface. And I think it's very beautiful, but I'm curious, why would you say more about Beulah and why you titled it the way you did?
Okay. I can go into a little of the making of it. Okay, I gotta think of how much to say. So basically I was doing work, getting assignment and work project ideas done for a class I teach. So I was doing a concrete rubbing on my side yard, which is in a suburban neighborhood, which is close to the house I grew up in, which it was more of the country. So that's an interesting, so there is a grief seeing things built up, but it is also where we are, and it will be a part of redemption. So that was the rubbing, and then kind of getting ideas and kind of doing funny exercises for the class, like to show just how to mix mediums and have fun with them. So I started drawing all, like, I'm like, oh yeah, the seeds, I'll draw. I'm like looking at my screen, drawing it as I'm telling you, but they're gonna be seedlings and that are growing through the concrete. But it also looks like they're dripping down, but physically, literally what it is they're drawn with the roots through the concrete rubbing. So it's a concrete rubbing of where I live with seeds like drawn around it.
Wow.
Literally that's what it is. And I do really care about combinations of elements. So even when I put a title card, I write something like Suburban Fresno County concrete rubbing ready. like because I want people to layer that in. And so as I thought about that, and I thought about my own life and kind of recovering from immense regret from a sad marriage situation I was in that had hard effects on me. Oh, this is recorded. Shoot.
Okay. Okay.
So thinking
Good
about
dad.
things like that, but also combining that like with the ultimate redemption, the ultimate messianic redemption. These are just concepts that truly all integrate together. And it is a grace to see the integration in my own life, see the integration in my city and things like physically that I live around, that I care about, like the actual land that I live in, and even the development of it, the stories of the people in it, but then the ultimate story that is our Lord's story. And Beulah, in some versions of the Bible, it's in Isaiah, it talks about redemption of the land, and like no longer will you be desolate, and your land will be called Beulah, or I forget how it, but it's like a Hebrew word. It means
It means
married.
heaven, doesn't it mean heaven?
I think it means married, but it's often used in songs and books to represent a promised land or heaven. So I do a lot of research, like any words I put in, what are people going to reference it with first? So I think a lot about that. I did silver instead of gold. That seemed to fit that best visually, but thinking about didn't Solomon, like silver was as plentiful as stones or something? Like, I don't know, like thinking about like kind of even just like messianic type of imagery, but that's some thoughts about that, and it's on a notebook. What a reminder. So those are that, and that kind of the combination of the feminine and how I see in scriptures, and that is God's concept, like the intersection of the feminine redemption, the bridal redemption, and that connection with the land redemption. Those themes are important to me. So now you know. So
Well, can I ask a few more questions?
yeah, you can.
So I really love the notebook paper. And I'm just curious because I can't really see it, but is it for the Your Land Will Be Married piece, is it torn out of a sketchbook, as in like we can see like the rips and the where the spiral used to be?
This one was torn out, but the rips don't show as well. So
I see it.
It's gel medium collage on the back, and then the blue is actually painted around it with acrylic ink. So it is, but unless you can't really see it in this photo, but this one doesn't show the tears as much, but it's taken from a little notebook page.
Yeah, I love the framing aspect, especially that the richness of that blue in conjunction with the man. I just got to say, I love knowing the backstory, because those lines are definitely some of the most interesting lines that I've seen there. And just to know that those were placed in response to the concrete, I think that's a lovely idea. And I think just it integrates itself really well and in balance with the rest of the piece. There's something almost thread-like to it.
That's a good word. I'm fascinated with the choice of red ink to use as the medium for these little seedlings. Was that a specific thought you had there?
Yeah, red ink is interesting. I think of things like correction. You know, when you get your paper back, I don't know if they're still allowed to do this, but I think you still do, like the red ink marks on the page when you're editing or grading a page. And it is a lined paper page. So I think about that. I think of red as, it can have association with blood. And they are dripping. The lines didn't drip, but they do somewhat have a drip-like appearance. So there is, I think, a blood connection, like the redemption of the blood, but then maybe there was spilling of blood, or the life of the person is in the blood, which is really interesting to combine with plants. But and the transformation from red to white, that's a common theme. Or like the blood that is shed and the new life that comes.
Yeah.
The red has many associations that I felt were accurate.
Jamie, this is like a blessing on your town.
Oh, thank
I
you.
mean, the Beulah, isn't this like a prophecy for like Jerusalem or the
Yeah,
promised land?
The Israel, yeah.
And it's just like it just seems to me like you're embodying a great blessing for a rebirth
Hmm.
for your town in this. It's just lovely.
Mm.
I think on a more grim note, it also evokes the words of the Genesis 4, right?
Mhm.
Abel's blood is in the ground and it cries out.
Mhm.
And of course, there's all sorts of good dissonance in that, and thinking about Beulah as a blessing, red as blood, blood as redemptive, but also in necessity of pain, right? Like the
Yes.
roughness of the concrete combined with the smoothness of this
Mhm.
I don't know, I guess a heavenly-ish blue. And then also, of course, just with the spiral pattern, or the circles, I should say.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Jamie, that you could extend this idea I mean, I love what's going on here, but when you were talking about the concrete, like I didn't see that as concrete, so I wouldn't like just looking at it without hearing you talk. So I was thinking of ways you could, take some photographs of what's being built, what's being poured over your land, and then collage some of the photographs over top. It might read more as concrete, or buildings that you could then draw over, or have some kind of cut marks, in collage work when you really kind of use that X-Acto blade. Those ridges might really communicate that dissonance, and also when you were speaking about, just the new life redemption over it, you could really play with those types of ideas to extend this idea into next pieces. Like, I don't think you need to do anything to this piece, but as you kind of work with those themes, maybe you could play with more of that collage work type realm, because I love like the line paper, you could use all types of things with photographs on plain paper if you want, you know what I mean? You could even, I don't know, print in different ways, but I love the combination of all the different themes that you're wrapping your head around. I think it's really interesting.
Jamie, I just want to hitch on to something Angela said, because mine's just really short and I love this one. It's really beautiful and I hope you'll do more. I even think if the piece of notebook paper was very small, the seedlings would be very small, and then this larger blue, it would kind of have a mood to it, I think, a little bit, that would kind of maybe punch the fact that it's so fragile. That's just an opinion. That doesn't mean you have to do it. I love the close-up of it and that we can see the rubbing and the beautiful lines and everything. So I wouldn't want to take away from that.
What is it? You mean like the background would be bigger, or I mean?
Yeah. Like, so I know this is a 9x12,
Scale
right?
of the paper would be small compared to the support surface.
Right. So like if you put it on a 24x30, that little piece of paper.
Okay.
Interesting idea. I see the juxtaposition of those seedlings and the root system. The root system seems perhaps even bigger than what those little seedlings would really need at this point in their life. And there's something deep rooted, I think, that you're conveying. Plus, when you put that concrete flavor on it, I do love the organic nature of the overlapping little seedlings. They're like little seagulls or windmills in life.
Did you say seagulls or windmills in life?
Yes.
Oh, I like that. Okay, that's cool.
So we have about 4 minutes left. Do we want to speak to the other pieces? I don't want to ignore.
Sure. Yeah, whichever.
I tend to zone in on one and take off.
Okay. Um,
But if there's any feedback on the others, let me know. Popcorn style.
So Jamie, on the Sea Beauty piece,
mhm.
there's quite a contrast between the deep grays and this true gold. Even though you said it's an imitation, it's still a leaf,
Mhm.
right? So what could you say more about why you chose the monochromatic painting and then you overlaid it with precious gold?
Mm.
Ooh, okay. So the thing about this one, I don't think I shared this. Here's what it is. Thank you for asking that question and for observing. So it's actually a golden painting. The entire wood panel has gold leaf on it. And then the black paint was painted solid over it. In which case, the only choice, if you choose to push through, is to use your finger to write what you must see.
Ah.
And scratch through it. So those scratch marks, though, if it looks like gold little scrawlies on top, it's black and white paint. So there's some, I felt, composition. I didn't think it should be solid black. And some Payne's gray, but those scrawlies are like.
Amy, we need a video of you making this. Oh my God.
That's the paint. And I intentionally use like everything about it. I thought of I chose oil instead of acrylic. I had a deadline, but like oil, technically you can dissolve off. And I like that idea of the true. I think a lot about Jacob wrestling with God. And there's a teacher I listen to, he says that thing you're wrestling with in the dark is really like, you'll find out it was God all along when the lights come on. I don't want to decrease what anyone might see in it or think they only have to think of that story when they see this, but I have wrestled. So there's truth behind the membrane of lies. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback that you were wanting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate everyone's comments. Thanks for
All right, Dawn, you're up next.
So I brought 3 old pieces. They just don't feel done, and I think they've been sitting in my studio for a while. So this is called Untouched. It's a waterfall. And these are all oil. This is called Unconditional. I don't like the foreground, so that's kept me from like feeling like it's done. I did enjoy the like light that was coming off the surface of it, so I think just maybe some feedback on that. And then I think the last one is called Where I Belong. And there's this tiny cedar. You probably can't see it, but there's a tree with little birds. The ground feels really boring. So I was wondering if instead of it undulating like that, but like having some kind of background that is almost, what's the word? Just faded more and having some more depth to it. So anyway, I'm just not really happy with them yet. I think they need something else and I can't seem to find it. So.
And Dawn, what are your dimensions for each of these?
Yeah, oh, thank you, Nathan. So that one's 48 by 48, and then the last 2 are 48 by 60.
Gold leaf on that one. Dawn, is it silver leaf on the others?
No, George, none of these are leafed. These are just oil. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, your mastery at showing movement of water that I can feel, I can hear it.
No,
The
thank you, George.
waterfall is spectacular.
Thank
And I've
you.
seen your pieces in person. So then just even to see these electronically, they're superb.
Thank you.
I see so much movement in the water
Mm.
that I think my eye is perhaps maybe wanting a more straight line horizon at the bottom,
Mhm, mhm.
that it would highlight the other movement elsewhere, almost a juxtaposition of the two.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lovely technique in all of them. That one's gorgeous.
Do you do layers? Do you do,
Mhm. Yeah.
it looks like mini layers, I'm assuming.
Yes. This is like, I can't even count how many.
It's oil, is it oil paint?
Yes.
Okay, oil paint. It's so luminous, the gradients, you're so delicate as you do it. And you're not,
Mm.
like, you're not trying to force the transitions,
Mm.
like, and you're not on this gold one. Cause I feel like there could be a temptation. This happens with me, it happens with us where, oh, if there's black up on top, like to box it in with the dark values, and that's not happening. You're letting yourself stay subtle.
Mm.
Like the bottom bar isn't black like the top corners are. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's like that. I don't know if it's the horizon, but I don't know if it's not really a horizon necessarily, but where the waterfall meets the water, like that line across, I can see it. It is lighter, like how subtle. And within
Oh,
the
man.
light areas, the lights are, and even within the dark areas, the subtle variation of the darks are very effective.
Mm.
Thank
Create
you.
the depth and the mood. Like you're very delicate. You're not trying to jam anything in there to get finished.
Yeah.
Patient. I
Well-
adore that little sprite of on the
Yeah. Yeah, George. I do too.
8
I
inches
think
from the side.
it was probably one of those moments where the paint, does what it wants, and then you go, oh wow, I like that. So I was trying to go with it, and I even tried it coming forward, and it looked weird. And I was like, I don't mind it looking weird. I just thought, oh, that doesn't fit the color of that, And so, anyway, but thank you. I do, in some sense, it felt in my heart like there's this thing flowing down, but there's also this little prayer going up. So it was
Yeah.
like a talking back and forth. I tend to like that with the waterfall, is there's this talking to me and then something back to it. But anyway, I don't like the foreground. But
See,
I would just say on this one, in the foreground, if you were to not have a part where it's not a continuous line all the way across, where it kind of like smooths out in one area, like to one side or the other, it might, I don't know, create a different pathway instead of just like line. I don't know. I don't know either, but I was just thinking if on one side, since you have like this sharper like brightness on the left-hand side in the foreground, maybe on the other side, it just blends into each other more. Like there's a change of value, but maybe not such a crisp line on the other side.
Yeah.
Dawn, can I ask you, what is it that you don't like about the foreground for this one?
it feels very like different than the rest of the painting to me. Like the mood isn't right. I don't know if I can, like the liquid is like not, so like almost like it's hard,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Dawn, does it have to be water in the foreground?
Well, no, if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear.
Well, as I look at these, I'm thinking of all of the stories of Moses, who, remember, was 80 when he first chatted with God. So we all have time. So settle in, everybody. But Dawn, as I'm looking at these, I realized that maybe your inspiration was a waterfall and that torrent of nature. But as I look at this piece and the other one that has a flattish foreground, I see desert and sand. And with this one, I'm wondering if what you don't like, that beautifully formed wave, the second feature, the one that has the little lip coming down, it's so well articulated that in some ways, I think it's creating a barrier. We get caught into that undertow that you've got in that second feature in the foreground. And so if that was flattened out a little bit more to welcome the viewer to walk in towards the torrent, walk in towards the light. It's just stunning. Each of your pieces take my breath away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind feedback.
Yeah. And I think even in looking at it in partnership with the other two pieces that you've chosen to share, one thing that I find very strong about that first piece is I'm a big fan of that composition, and largely it's the dynamic between those diagonals. And I'm wondering, one thing that to think about for this particular piece, its strength is in its diagonals. And I wonder what it might look like to increase the contrast and some of the value between the light and the dark, much like the second piece where the contrast is the most dynamic part. And I'm curious what it might look like to invite I see a kind of like this reddish diagonal going from top left to bottom right. And I wonder what it might look like if that diagonal could be accentuated a little bit more, to kind of even create a formal balance with the lines that you have on the bottom. But I agree with, I'm so sorry, I don't, illumination.
Oh, sorry. I can't figure out how to rename my Zoom thing on my, on this pro. I'm Mel. I'm Mel Alborn.
Mel,
sorry. I apologize.
I also agree with Mel in the sense that I think I like the foreground visible on the last panel, but I like the haze visible on the first panel, and I wonder what it might look like to have the focus, because the waterfall is so intricately detailed. I do kind of get that sense of what Mel is saying, is that the equal or commensurate detail of the waves in the foreground end up creating a slight obstacle visually into entering into the depth of the piece. Right. And I guess just maybe thinking about it in this note of like the beauty of the haze that you capture in all of these pieces, if I may be so bold, it makes me a little skeptical of if I would even be looking at the waves this closely. Or like, I guess the part of me is that it's the speed of the torrent that I see visually makes me feel like that it would cause so much more mist that even the detail of that foreground that you mentioned would not be as crisp as what I'm seeing right now.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Nathan. That's good.
But I will just say this: I love the last piece, and just like, oh, the Dawn, the movement. It's
Hmm.
like,
Thank you, Nathan. Well, I mean, maybe I just felt like maybe it was too ho-hum at the bottom. I don't know.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Mhm.
No.
No, no, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Your
So-
feedback is don't touch it.
Look at those little birds coming in to nest at the tree.
yeah. And I guess I'm not sure if this is the visual by which we're experiencing the medium, but have you tried playing with like how visible those birds appear? Like, because I know you work so much with layers.
Yeah.
Have they been like clearer, and have you seen what it might look like there?
Yeah, yes, I actually thought that too, Nathan, like, oh, I can hardly see him. And so it was like, oh, make it a little darker. But I felt like that wasn't true to where they are in the mist. So I was trying to like play back and forth with it. But I know what you're saying, and I'm thinking you're right, that just maybe a little darker there. It actually is a weird, and forgive me, I'm probably taking up too much time, but theologically, I'm struggling with this painting because it's like my theology of suffering. And so it's like I'm not sure what I'm saying. And so the painting is telling me what I'm believing, but I'm not sure what I'm saying. So part of me with the birds was like, what am I saying with the birds?
Mm.
Ooh.
So I
Mhm.
wouldn't mind, like, maybe talking with you about it some other time. But anyway, it's yeah, I do like that this painting has been like that for me.
Mm.
So
Mm.
And Dawn, if you don't know
mhm.
what's going on with the birds, sometimes you need to put a pin in that for another piece.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Sometimes sometimes we just know that that's something we need to return to. And and everyone here knows how to ask for help. We all know, each one of us, we all take this to prayer and ask for service, and we listen, we wait, right?
Yes. I
Yeah.
do believe I do believe that birds are the one creature, to me, talking about story, that depict the heavenly and the earthly. They are the in-between creature. So to me, it's like for me, if I'm using them, it's that passage between the eternal and the land. So
Yeah.
Mm.
Interesting.
And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, as you're saying that, I think, wow, that's amazing. Because thinking about the days of creation and the separation of the waters.
mm,
And I think that's the only part in the first account where it, like, God does not say it was good. It just says it was. And then the next day, like, God says that the creative acts are doubly good. So that is interesting to think about. But the separation of the waters, and then like in Revelation where it talks about, and there was no more sea, like thinking about waters coming back together. And how it in this physical actual painting, like visually, compositionally, like the birds, how you're talking about how heaven and earth are meeting, and then they're physically like in this mist cloud of water falling from heaven to earth, and the mist of earth like rising back up. How that cycle of separation and reunion is happening with the birds. I think that's really interesting as you're sharing, and then I'm looking at combining the birds with the water. But I did notice the birds, and I feel totally okay that you can't see them right away, because I feel that's like many blessings in life that God gives us. They are maybe we don't notice them right away, or maybe they aren't in your face, but they're beautiful. And when you know they're there, they'll never be gone. So
Yeah. And again, like not to import this as the symbolism, but like hearing the story of this piece as I like how you phrased it, right? That I feel like in suffering, theology sort of woo
Yeah.
sort of gets hazy, and you know, and I think the mystery behind those birds, right, is like what would make us question our connection to the divine? It's what else but suffering, right? And you know, there's so much more theology to unpack in there, but it kind of gives me a new way of appreciating the hint of the birds in relation to what you're trying to convey. But again, another thing that I must say, the diagonal, just the it's exciting.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Dawn, for sharing, and
Mhm.
you get the feedback that you were looking for. I hope so.
yes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. All right, Mel. Thank you for being patient.
Oh, it's all good. And I would like to apologize to everyone. I'm on a new device and I can't yet figure out how to rename my account with
You're
my
fine.
personal name. So I apologize. And I'm so glad to be here. It's so rare for me to be able to get feedback and critique from other artists, and it means a lot to me. To give you just a little bit of background, I am a professional artist. I have been for many years. Most of my clients are churches and cathedrals, and I do a great deal of classical religious work, and I share an awful lot of appreciation for historic painting in our Christian religious heritage, as Nathan does. And yet my entire life, starting from the age of about 4 or 5, I have been seeking to find a way to take the beauty of what we see in our historic churches and translate that visually in some way to speak to people today. And the reason why I want to do that is because I'm an artist. I've discovered something that I want to share. And I discovered God through art, or in some way, art opened up my heart and my mind and my soul in such a way that I could experience God, and come to know God and to be saved by God. For a while, I got to admit, for a while, I thought I was special. And then I realized, oh no, actually, no. Let's look at who Jesus's friends were, right? And I'm one of those. But the piece that we're looking at here, and thank you so much, Angela, for going kind of through it. This is the sort of piece that I would really like to do. It's a very contemporary piece. And was it Dawn or was it Jamie that was talking about birds being kind of in both worlds? The essence of this piece, of course, is an angel, and the circle has got them. The idea is that they're in a very special place, a sacred place, a holy place, captured within a moment of kairos, of God's time. And the angel is looking at the bird who's flying, and the bird is looking at the angel with the wings. And for me, this prompts some ideas about identity and place and the natural world. The bird would be visible in the natural world. Angels of God, the best that I understand, they're not. Now, I have to ask forgiveness because we really, or I really have no idea what an angel looks like. And in this case, I've definitely used a feminine presentation of her face. I just recently did a series of 5 maquettes of angels based on the Hebrew names of angels, and they're all wearing masks. So that you can't see their eyes or their mouths. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we really know what an angel looks like, and it's probably a good idea while we're human, actually. But you'll see if you look at the piece as a whole, you'll notice there's a patterning in the background that continues into the halo, the golden orb, to show that, or to try to show that our incarnate world is actually also God's world, a blessed and holy place. And anyhow, this is really, this is the kind of work that I would most like to do, and it's the hardest. I can, and Nathan, you'll understand this. I mean, I can copy a Rembrandt. I can copy a Vasari. I can copy a Michelangelo. But what is that as an artist? How is that going to show my evidence to the world of what I've seen and what I've learned, right? And so I bring this to you, and please just, I would like to hear everything you've got to say.
I love it.
Well, before you even said the juxtaposition of contemporary with classical view, I picked up on the yoga pants and thought, what a fascinating garment for an angel to be wearing, with a strong core abdomen displayed.
She's a modern girl.
She is. Yep. And so that was a very, so all the other elements nod to classical, and those two elements just made her in the here and now. Arms, core, even her top could be very contemporary design, and very, I love the idea of bringing the ancient into the now.
I was at a conference 2 weekends ago at Princeton. It was a sacred arts conference. And I posed the question about my love. Well, I have a great love of the symbols of our faith, all of the ancient symbols. And my mourning the fact that so many people today don't recognize them. They don't know what they mean. And the host of the conference, Margarita Mooney Clayton, who teaches at Princeton Theological Seminary, she said immediately, people today, they don't have the education and the exposure to understand these symbols. And what she didn't say, but what I took from that is they also aren't actually probably ever going to. You know, it's something that we see in a museum, a beautiful altarpiece, you know, some of the works that Nathan was quoting in his beautiful work. And and ultimately, because I'm an artist and I want to share what I've discovered, which is this joy and this beauty of God and Christ and what Christ has done. How do I share that if I can't use the ancient vocabulary, the heritage vocabulary, the Renaissance vocabulary? You know, how do I begin to do that? And so this is a meager attempt. This is oil on vellum, by the way. Just, you know, drafter's vellum. So there's my my frustration, and I don't know, maybe you all have more to say.
Mm.
I love what you're doing. I really am drawn to the comparison of the wings. That's really where when I'm looking at it, I'm just kind of going back and forth between the two different sets of wings and thinking of hope in different forms. I think what you were saying about the education of younger people, or just people in general today, I think there is a desire to know details and hidden meanings, and that desire is still among us. I feel like the voice of art in the church the volume has been turned down. So I feel like if there were more just areas to speak about, that people would be dialed in. I don't think it's a lack of like, we don't care about this, we don't want to know about this. I just think that there's a lot of other voices that have been turned up so loud that it's hard to meander that message through. So I would just encourage you to keep making work like this and explain it to people and take that time, because I feel like in our human nature, we are drawn to the history and the deeper meanings of things. We have a natural bent to that, otherwise, like the Avenger movies, they wouldn't be so popular, right? Like you have to see all 25 to know all the hidden meanings. And there's that innate desire in us to understand these different worlds. And if that were that focus, from the loudness of culture would be moved a little bit towards our spiritual heritage, then I think that there would still be that robust knowledge and desire there. So I would just encourage you to keep going, like keep doing this, because it's really interesting to look at and to hear you speak about it. It's, even if it's in smaller groups, like be encouraged. Like it's very interesting. Held my attention for sure.
Yeah. And I think, the symbolism is very fascinating, because I think of poets like T.S. Eliot, who went very esoteric in his symbolism and packed it all in. Whereas like the most audience members, when they read it, they kind of have this dawning where something is happening, and it kind of becomes a barometer for the quality of the soul of the person. Is that, do they want to know what's happening, or are they content to, be ignorant? I think that's definitely the great strength of all the religious symbols, is that when somebody sees, I think of like the old icon of Christ's baptism in the Jordan River. When they see John the Baptist pouring water over Jesus, and then they see in the river further down is a old man, right? That it's intentional symbolism to evoke that curiosity. So I kind of, to echo what Angela's saying, is like the continued play with symbolism, I think, is as long as artists like you and me, right, are relying on those traditions, then and putting them in our work and then showing our work, then the curiosity of what it means and how it will serve our artwork compositionally will also create the educational curiosity that is there. But I think one of the things that I really love about the piece, I think there's just some lovely details. I think the wings have already been mentioned. The hair is definitely worth mentioning. And I think the expressions I find very curious, because in a lot of ways, right, like the modernity of the angel really comes through, and kind of in the posture, and as well as kind of the expression. And I was very curious about that. But one other thing compositionally, and that I'm curious about, is, have you considered, or what is it that you've thought about what she might be doing with her left hand?
Mm. Hmm. Well, I actually did consider her reaching out towards the bird. And then I realized that sometimes the left hand actually needs to be, in some cultures especially, the left hand shouldn't be doing anything. It's the right hand that reaches.
Mm.
So then I thought, okay, well, I'm too far into it. So what I might do with the next one is have the right hand possibly reaching. What are you thinking? What would you have the hands doing? See,
Yeah,
I sort of had her thinking of her like seeing this bluebird, and that I was trying to get the interplay of what might be happening inside of their experience of seeing one another. And is she seeing a freedom in the bluebird? Is the bluebird seeing I don't know. And so I was trying to convey some form of emotion.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's a part of me that I guess maybe kind of even just with the composition of her of the way that you've postured the figure, because the right hand's kind of just hanging down. I
Mhm.
think it creates a really strong linear line of that lighter value color, but then it almost kind of creates, well, I guess the sense of like you almost expect to see something with the left hand, either in a way of moving toward the bluebird or somewhere in it compositionally. And I guess the part of me that's thinking about maybe even just anatomically would kind of be that the way the figure is turning, I feel like I either want to see a arm kind of creating more diagonals in the composition, or even just the hint of a shoulder just on the other side. And I guess maybe it's probably with the way the legs are posed that's kind of making me feel
Mhm.
like I should be seeing a hand, because it seems like she is opening herself towards the bluebird with
Mhm.
the slight posturing forward of that left leg.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
Mel,
Yeah.
are her eyes directed at the bluebird in the image?
Maybe, I'm not sure. We'd have to focus in. This is it's a sketch,
Mm-hmm.
so it was really done rather quickly. But her eyes should be, whether they are or not, I'm not sure. But in the finished piece, they would be.
So one thing that struck me was she seems nonplussed by a bird flying within, a foot of her.
Well, she's an angel. Come on, George.
I
You know.
know. So there's something, she's very grounded, though her feet are floating in air. But
Well,
there's
and
something that she's not surprised by the glory of God's bluebird flying up in her face.
well, I think, but she's more from the glory of God side of things. I think
True.
I think that, but I don't know. I like
I
the
kind of
questions.
I kind of looked at it as it's almost like a mirror, like she's in two different forms.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
you have the red and the blue like on her breastplate, or what, not breastplate, but her top, and
Mhm.
the same colors are on the breast of the bird. And so I was just kind of envisioning, like, is this like I'm kind of looking at myself in different realms,
Mhm.
Wow.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. So she wouldn't necessarily be surprised because she's looking at herself, but like that's
Mm.
just kind of what I was gleaning from it.
Wow.
Yeah,
I never saw that.
I felt the same way as Angela in that regard. Actually thought it was a kingfisher. I know the beak would probably be a little bit longer, but I thought of the coloring of the kingfishers like a hunter. It's a beautiful, beautiful hunter, and it's very swift, and almost, this is such a delicate coloring with the white and the gold, and then yet there's these two beings that are in the halo in the gold. And so to me it made the bird her, and her the bird. And I wondered if you could do a bunch of women and birds, or I don't know, but it would be awesome. So I just think you should do more.
Mm.
So I have homework. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that could be an amazing exercise, and also just an amazing series too. When you're saying this is the work that you want to make, you know,
it is.
it's, you could also put some of your own self-narrative in that as well. You know.
Well, I will take this under advisement. And I mean, you know, truth be told, I do so much very classical work for churches, and classical sculpture, and I love that. And I love that there are churches that still want that. And at the same time, I feel deeply pulled. And I'm in awe of all of the work that you're doing. And I think it's so very important. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you all. I was hoping we'd have a few moments so I could share a little bit of what I'm working on as well.
Yes, please.
So I am starting a new series of what's going to be mostly textile work, but I'm just thinking about tree houses, and using those as kind of a metaphor of like the house being where you feel safe and where you're placing your shelter, and the tree being kind of like identity. And so trying to find a safe space within is the ideas that I'm looking for. So I have a series of sketches, very loose sketches, but that would be stitching pieces. So they would be larger. And so, yeah, there are a few different ideas of where these little houses are being placed. And I'm not really sure on colors or anything yet, but I want them to be really detailed stitching pieces. So it's kind of trying to wrap my head around what to do with these, but and trying to decide which one do I want to try first.
Angela, do you stitch by hand or by machine?
By hand. You do? Yes. So French knots and embroidery thread mostly. My background is in photography, and so I've used that a lot in my work in the past. And the past couple of years, I've kind of ventured into painting and stitching and using both of those, either based off photographs or not. But I was kind of wanting to venture into something new where it wasn't really based on a photograph. It was just mainly using the symbolisms of those two things. So which one do y'all like the best? Which one should I start?
I have a question. Does each composition, do you kind of choose these compositions just kind of free association and you start drawing what comes to your mind, or are these all planned, like the limb with the house, there are specific references you're making?
These
like
are all
multiple trees, or are they just kind of starting to put thumbnails out?
These are all very beginning, loose, free association, like just playing with houses and trees. Most of my work in the past has been about specific houses and specific places. And so I'm trying to kind of just zoom out a little bit more and play with like this little form of a house, where you would, I mean, I have 3 kids, so I like seeing how they interpret their home, too. And so I just thought, well, maybe I'll make the house as simple as possible and place them in these different parts of a tree, right? Like where would I want to place my safety bin? So like the one with the 2 trees is like, this isn't a good choice. Like those branches are gonna crack, but I kind of just wanted to play with that idea of, where you build your house, where your foundation is, and just kind of being hidden among the vine. This one I was thinking about, I'm the vine, you're the branches kind of thing. And just where would I want that safety to be among the leaves and among the life? And so it's a very, very, very loose beginning stage. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
And how big would you do these, Angela?
So I would love for them to be on the larger size for a stitched piece. So I would say 20 by 20. I would love to see something really intricate. Yeah, so it would take, that's why I'm like, which one do I want to start first? Because they take a long, long time. And so, yeah.
Well, my abstract heart was really drawn to the very first one that had the very loose limbs and then this very simple 3 lines that tell me a house in a tree.
Yeah.
And it says a house out on a limb with a view out far, but also the precarious nature of home.
Yeah.
And protection that it takes.
Thank you, George.
The thought that came to mind was, especially since this is just preliminary, it isn't necessarily even in like what the final forms will look like, but however this looks for you is just the specificities of like research, or whatever word you might use for your version of research, like all the scriptures in the Bible about trees, like filling yourself like spiritually and in your vision and praying about it too. But what are the scriptures about trees? What are the scriptures about home? What does Jesus say about those things? What are all the visual references in the Bible or like in other teachings about those things? And will these trees be trees near? I know you talked about the more general description of the house shape, but will these trees, and you talked about the vine and branches specifically, but will any of these trees be specific to your place or interest in learning about the tree and how trees work? And even if I found that when I do those things, even if the basics stay the same, some like nuances or color or surprises can occur. Like God can use the research to inform these details that are amazing. And that's what I'm thinking of, is the research of the tree and the imagery.
I love how this one has the branches coming towards us. That's a angle that we don't get a lot in work, and I just love that it's reaching towards me. And Angela, take this for what it's worth. So it's like 2 cents. So I think you might even think about the type of tree, like just as an example. To me, this has like that oak feel, that very beautiful twists and turns. And I have live oaks in my neighborhood. I imagine they're in every one of ours because they're native here, but yeah, they're wonderful for limbs and all that. But also just want to like maybe suggest one to you of a weeping willow, simply because of the way the house could be tucked inside those lines. And I'm not saying you have to do that either, but I love the idea of the simplicity of the house. I think we got it. We know it. We got the symbol, and just go and have such fun with putting it in all these places and the colorings and everything. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I growing
Agree.
up in South Texas, live oaks were
Mm.
all over. I mean, I think the property that I lived on we had over 150 live oaks. So I think that's my nature to just draw live oaks all the time. It's just a free association. That's what comes out. But yeah, I'll do some research on weeping willows too.
Well, Angela, you have some homework too. In fact, I think we all do.
Absolutely. That is
Mhm.
the whole point of this call. I just appreciate each and every one of you. We are past time by 3 minutes, so we don't want to take up too much of your evening. But thank you so much for your artwork, for sharing, for being vulnerable, for allowing yourself to be seen and also your art to be seen. It's an amazing gift that you give to the world, and I'm just forever grateful for that. And in a couple days, you'll get a follow-up email. If you want your social media or website to be shared, please just email me at visualart@arthousedallas.com, and we will share that with this group. And then there will also be a survey because we love feedback. We want feedback on our feedbacks. So feel free to fill that out as well, and tell us how we can do better and what we're doing well. So we just appreciate this community, and please, if you're in the Dallas area, look up arthousedallas.com. We have a ton of events coming up. We also have a lot of virtual events too if you're far. So anyway, that's all. I hope y'all take care, and thank you, Nathan, for sharing. Wow, what a wonderful gift you gave us today.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Be
Bye,
well.
everybody.
Bye.